Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I mean, look, being an entrepreneur, I would not go through the rest of my life without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, piracetam, oxiracetam, uridine monophosphate, CDP-choline, modafinil, Noopept, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 26 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. Hi everyone, I am your host Ryan Michael Ballo, and on this Nootropics podcast, we're going to talk about modafinil. Modafinil is, well, I mean, if there was an emperor of nootropics, it would be modafinil, right? If someone were to crown one of these nootropic compounds the emperor, it'd be modafinil. I mean, it is one of the most powerful, one of the most effective, certainly in the top three for effect duration, the effect duration window. I mean, for me, it lasts 10 to 12 hours. At 11 o'clock at night, if I took it at 9 in the morning, I'm still noticing some degree of brain performance enhancement as a result of taking the modafinil, whether it's just a little bit of wakefulness, a little bit of extra energy, and a little bit of motivation. There's still something going on. Modafinil is the mighty emperor of nootropics. We're going to talk about, though, how there's such an allure with taking modafinil because it is so powerful and it puts you in a place where the brain functions so well that folks really need to be careful in that regard, particularly around cycling, and how, it just is easy for folks to start taking modafinil, realize how great it is and how great it affects their brain, what productivity they can get as a result of it, and then for them to go, I want to take modafinil every day. And then that is a mistake. That I think is something that folks getting into the nootropic sphere, especially in the beginning, really get sucked into quickly, like thinking, like, I'm just going to live my life this way. I'm going to take these compounds every day, or a particular compound every day. It just isn't how it works. It's just not how the brain works. And I don't suggest it. You can really fully optimize your brain with certain nootropics to the point where, number one, you don't need as many nootropics over time. And number two, with optimal cycling strategies, which is something we talk about very heavily in the Smarter, Better, Faster Nootropics Guide, to some extent in the Racetam God Guide. These are both digital books you can get at livecortex.com that you can read on any device you have. That cycling is just very necessary. Okay, so we'll get into all that in just a second, but let me do a minute or two of product promotion of powerful nootropic products. Number one, the Cortex Nootropic Stack. Talk about modafinil. We basically created a stack that tried to mimic modafinil. We tried to create a natural version of the effects that modafinil would give someone, to include the effect duration, because the Cortex stack for a lot of folks lasted an incredibly long time. We're talking about 6 to 9 hours of good solid brain function with a solid initial burst of good solid brain function for the first 5 hours, and then of course the 4 hours, sort of a nice descending into an even optimized baseline for some folks at hour 9. It combines CDP-choline, uridine monophosphate, and artichoke extract with a little bit of Bacopa monnieri in a very particular combination. Look, the best way to get the best effect from stacking nootropics is to find the nootropics that stack extremely well together in very particular doses. That's called using nootropics surgically. That is our MO. We created a stack that I was using to run a company for 18 hours a day with great brain performance. It's called Cortex. Get it at livecortex.com. That stack's powerful. You're not going to be sorry. If you respond well to it, you're going to be like, all right, this is... I found a gem, because the utility in pre-made stacks is incredible. Take a couple capsules, boom, you're done, you're in. No measuring, no powders, no mess. It's easy. We talked about the God Guide, the digital nootropics guides in general. We wrote 2 of them. These are extremely valuable. They give you stacks. They give you information. They give you questions answered. They give you nootropics protocols. One of them is on all the racetams, strictly on racetams. Okay, teaches you how to use all the racetams. It's super easy too. We lay it out very, very easily. We explain the mechanism of action, the dose, what you should take it with, sublingual stacks with that racetam, which are stacks you can take with the racetam under your tongue to let it dissolve, to get particular brain state, brain performance states. And then a list of oral stack lists, just stacks of that racetam with a bunch of other compounds that I refined over 8.5 years. You're basically getting access to 80 plus stacks with the racetam God Guide that have taken me nearly a decade to refine. Get that at livecortex.com. It's digital, so you can download it on any device you have and then read it. And then also, for those of you that are new to nootropics, within a year or so, I mean, people that are 5 or 10 years in are still going to get a lot of benefit from this, but we wrote an all-encompassing nootropics guide. It's like how to use nootropics surgically, period. Racetams, modafinil, Alcar, all the choline sources, everything else you can think of, from phenibut to research chemicals like PRL 853. That's called Smarter, Better, Faster. We explained it all of the dose ranges, and many powerful stacks. Again, stuff that took me 10 years to figure out, basically. That's called Smarter, Better, Faster. And then lastly, we do stack consulting on nootropics, where we basically help you refine your stack and get it perfect. Get all this stuff at livecortex.com. Man, I tried to do that in under 2 minutes, but there was no way. I had to really fully explain the Racetam God Guide and the Smarter, Better, Faster book. Okay, so modafinil. Look, I mean, let me just brief explanation on modafinil. It's an anti-narcoleptic drug. It's very powerful, works on a bunch of different neurotransmitters, increases extracellular dopamine. It's powerful. You can take it. The dose range is on the very low end, 20 milligrams, to on the high end, 200 milligrams. Folks that need more than that, you really want to look at what's happening in your brain and body to make you require so much modafinil. And most folks are going to find their sweet spot somewhere around 75 milligrams. Okay, it's a prescription drug, so you have to have a prescription to take it. There are people, I'll just make the statement that there are people in the world on planet Earth that are procuring modafinil from pharmaceutical companies in India, and perhaps the best way, hypothetically, if one were to do that, to get in contact with people who understand that whole sphere is to connect with the various Facebook nootropics groups. There's one called Nootropics 2.0, and there's one called I think it's just called the Facebook it's just called Nootropics Group. It's got like each of them have 20 plus thousand members of them. They're Facebook nootropics group. So go find them, interact with folks there, search around, and find out where people are doing that, procuring modafinil, if that's the route that you would hypothetically decide to take. But the bottom line is that modafinil is very powerful. You could. I was getting around to saying you can take it in the morning at 9 a.m. And then basically have exceptional brain function where you feel like you've slept for 30 hours with the most comfortable quilt ever. With like an angel breathing over your face while you're sleeping, and like sprinkling like energy dust all over you, so that when you wake up you're just like a rocket. It's basically insane. If you've seen the Limitless movie, where the actor Bradley Cooper, gets like runs like this, like his girlfriend's brother or something has this like black market pharmaceutical drug, and he gives it to him, and it turns his brain on something incredibly powerful, and the guy goes out and becomes like a Wall Street trader and makes millions of dollars, and his brain's like functioning awesomely. It's basically like that, without the side effects. I mean, there's very minimal side effects with modafinil as far as folks can tell. Folks have them, right? And we'll get to that here in just a bit, but the stuff is very well studied and for the most part pretty well tolerated. That's modafinil. It's very powerful. It will give you mental energy, speed of processing, motivation, not necessarily verbal fluency, but maybe as a byproduct verbal fluency. But it's just strong. It is a strong nootropic compound that lasts a very long time, requires relatively low doses, and is exceptional. Okay, so that's modafinil. The thing about modafinil, okay, is that it's alluring. When you take it, okay, and you notice the massive surge and the massive difference in your brain, and thus your capacity to do things, to be productive, it changes you, right? It changes. It makes you want to keep taking modafinil, and it also makes you understand. Look, wow, I mean, I have a capacity to crank out work or be productive or use my brain at this level. Hey, this is crazy. Output, having extra, this is why nootropics are so cool and why I'm so into them, and why I thank 8.5 years of nootropics for my brain being so awesome at baseline right now. Like, I didn't take nootropics today, and my brain's rocking. It's because they optimize brain function. You never go back once you can, optimize neurotransmitter receptor sites, when you can stave off neurodegeneration, when you can remove lipofuscin, which is this accumulation of toxins that happens in the brain with compounds like Alcar. This happens. There's studies on that. Google it. Google Alcar and lipofuscin removal. It happens. And so these things are very impressive. And so once you get to the point where you notice the benefits of them, it's super alluring and you want to keep taking them. But the best way to take nootropics, as you'll often hear me talk about if you've been with me for a while or if you're new to our content, is to cycle off of them, is to use them wisely, is to use nootropics that optimize the brain in a way where you have to take less of those nootropics over time. Uridine is one of those. Noopept, in my opinion, is another one, and there are many others that are in that category. And then just while you're taking nootropics, to cycle appropriately. Take nootropics, take a particular compound for a month, cycle off for a couple weeks, take a compound for 3 days, cycle off for 4 days, do 3 days on, 4 days off, 4 days on, 3 days off, 5 days on, 2 days off, and then 2 weeks off for good measure. That's the way you really want to use nootropics. But modafinil is so powerfully alluring that it basically makes people want to use it every day. Okay, especially if you're, I talk to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. These guys are hard-hitting. They wake up at 9 a.m. and they're working, building companies until midnight or 1. And that's all they ever think about. That's what I do. I'm not a Silicon Valley entrepreneur because I don't believe in they have a very different philosophy from me. They're not very revenue-centric and a whole bunch of other things. I'm a traditional entrepreneur. I like to build a real company. I'm not into taking venture capital money, all the stuff they do over there, and they're on their own culture, whatever. But, I work 15 hours, 18 hours a day building my company. That's how I am. That's how I've always been in most of my adult life after the United States military, which I spent 3.5 years in when I became an adult. And so these guys over there, they're taking modafinil, and a lot of other entrepreneurs and a lot of folks in the corporate sector are taking modafinil. And when you recognize that the productivity, that your level of productivity triples, quadruples. It sounds like it's too, I'm exaggerating, but I'm not. Your brain really does have the capacity to output significantly. When you take modafinil, when all these neurotransmitter systems and when all this extra dopamine is floating around extracellularly in your brain, to crank out a whole lot of work. So it's alluring, and you want to take it every day. But I just want to, the basis of this podcast is, though modafinil is very alluring, you do want to cycle it. Okay, here are a couple of reasons why you want to cycle modafinil. Okay, number one, one of the anecdotal things that happens to folks when they take modafinil for considerable periods of time, I would say a month plus, really we're looking at 2, 3, 4 months plus, and they don't do a whole lot of cycling, is they run into a place where, modafinil made some modifications to their brain, and this likely has to do with some sort of dopamine thing going on in their brain, that they stop taking modafinil, and essentially they're sort of depressed for a week or 2 weeks. You're going to find this all across the nootropic sphere. That's never happened to me. I've taken modafinil for 45 days straight as an experiment, and I was fine thereafter, but I was also meditating and exercising and trying to do things to keep neurotransmitters relatively balanced in response, to the excess dopamine that modafinil was creating. And look, I know how to create a good state of brain function without modafinil, right? That's something that you have to learn how to do over time, with other nootropics and with other protocols. That's just an important thing to remember. But that's one of the things that people do run into over time taking modafinil pretty consistently, is they stop taking modafinil and then they sort of start to feel depressed for 2 or 3 weeks. It clears up after 2 or 3 weeks because whatever might have been, a little haywire, or at least attempting homeostasis in terms of dopamine functionality, dopamine transporters, dopamine receptors, after you stop taking modafinil, that gets back to normal in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It's a relatively short period of time. But to prevent that, you got to cycle. You have to cycle the stuff. You don't want to take it for 3 months every day of your life. That's number one. Number two, not that modafinil is particularly hard on the liver, because it really doesn't seem to be. But you must know this. With any nootropic, you are ingesting, it is passing through your liver. Your liver's having to clear it. Then you've got this whole detoxification system in your body that tries to get it out. And that's all good and well if that system works well. But in America, for example, these are things that take years of distinctions. You got to study this to understand it. In America, go outside of your house and attempt to eat food and drink drinks outside of your house, and it's all relatively toxic, right? I mean, it's low level, it's whatever, it's not significant, but it piles up. The food is made of chemicals your body isn't really meant to digest. These are called food products, and as a result, over time, especially when people make bad decisions on what to eat, like if they're eating excessively high fat, this whole paleo movement is really messing people up, and it's just, it is, trust me, dietary dogma is a bad thing. That's a whole other argument, but excessively high fat foods, and people start getting into like eating only bacon and like sweet potatoes or something. It just, these are the kind of things that over time slow gut motility, change specific species of bacteria within the large bowel in your colon, and over time changes the way that you respond to food and changes bowel transit time. Okay, this is all stuff that's heavily researched, and you could go research for yourself, and I came to figure it out myself through doing the research. So anyway, terrible diets put people in the place where they're not eliminating their colons quick enough. Okay, so food is sitting in there, toxins are sitting in there, it's building up in the intestines, and guess where it has to go then? Well, the body has to distribute it throughout itself. It goes in your muscles, it goes in your joints, it goes in your brain, it goes in organs. It tries to spread it out as much as it can. It goes in your lymphatic system, in lymph fluid. Okay, so this system, the liver, the kidneys, the lymphatic system, your lungs, your skin, as many organs as, there's many organs that are involved in the detox process, and these things can get overwhelmed by a bad lifestyle and by bad lifestyle choices. And when that happens, and you take something that the liver has to process consistently, you may not necessarily, but you're going to set up the possibility, and a pretty darn good possibility, of overtaxing the sort of toxin cleanup system within your body, overtaxing the liver's capacity, putting a toxic load, that's an overburdened load, on your body. I can't tell you how many times I see this over and over and over and over again with people that are taking hardcore pharmaceutical drugs because they have one condition or another, and pharma doesn't want to give them anything that'll fix it, doesn't want to encourage people to learn about their bodies, it just wants to give them a drug, and so over time the drugs are hard on the liver and kidneys, and because they're eating like crap, they're not eliminating, they're constipated, they're not eliminating either the small and large intestine. They've got like small bowel overgrowth, specifically SIBO in the small intestine, of gram-positive bacteria, but that just overgrow in where they're not supposed to grow in the small intestine. And so as a result, you got people that are walking around super toxic. Like they need to really, really clear, they need to expel for a while, they need to look into doing some enemas, they need to look into doing liver cleanses and all this stuff. And so, that's why you should cycle modafinil, okay? If you've got an incredible diet, and your particularly your toxic elimination process is working really well, and that means lots of bowel movements, lots of water, lots of exercise, lots of breathing, good, solid, circulating lymph fluid, then taking modafinil relatively regularly, at least for 2-3 months, and then cycling off for 2 weeks or so, is really not going to be a problem. But that's just a caveat that I like to bring forth so the folks truly understand why they really want to work on cycling, particularly modafinil. The other reason you want to cycle modafinil is I guess philosophical, but it's more like gut. It's like I've got the data for this over time through my experience and others, and a whole bunch of pulling information sources from the web, from my own intuition, from research, etc. And then it's also, my gut on it and my sort of philosophical perspective on, taking nootropics over time. You want options, okay? And when you have to rely on taking modafinil consistently without cycling, you don't have options. You do not have other nootropic options to achieve similar brain states, right? You don't have other options in your life, like, in particular exercise routines or other supplement routines or even cleansing routines, ways to optimize your brain and body. Otherwise, you don't have other options if you're only relying on modafinil. I like to cycle between stacks. I like to cycle between Cortex one day, modafinil another day. We'll go with racetams one day. We switch between cholinergics and dopaminergics. Then we move to a GABAergic or a serotonin-based nootropic. And then cycling off for a couple of weeks. That is the best way because you want options. There You have options. That is the best way to to go about it. I mean, one of the things that we're going to start instituting into podcasts to let folks know is like, there are other, like instituting it into the whole sphere of taking nootropics. You wouldn't believe the kind of brain performance you can get when you go on very particular organ and detox cleanses, like these, some of these cleanses that are out there. Some of them, maybe BS or whatever, who knows. The notion of cleansing organs, though, totally isn't. I mean, that's retarded. Like folks, mainly it's pharmaceutical industries influencing journalism, particular media companies that might be putting content out. Those pharmaceutical companies are actually paying those media companies to advertise their drugs. And then you've got people whose identity is attached to believing anything the establishment says and anything the medical community says. So they're out there talking about, you detox either way, no matter what, and you don't have to worry about it. You detox when you breathe. Yeah, well, some people's phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox pathways can go awry, and there's very many. The science is already out there published. People are just not looking at it. They're refusing to look at it. And then, if you're constipated, like we were talking about before, and your bowels aren't working correctly, there's no way you're eliminating toxins the way that you're supposed to, okay? So cleanses, though, good solid liver cleanses, just take 5 teaspoons rather of Epsom salt, in the morning on an empty stomach, and drink a bunch of water and watch what happens. You are going to expel a lot of stuff from your bowels, and when you rehydrate and get minerals back into your body, damn, you're going to feel good. Okay, so there's so many ways to perform better, to get your brain to feel really good, to clear stuff in your body. And one of the things that we do when we're doing consults with people, because we consult on nootropics to help you refine your stack, but we also consult on brain performance. Like, we're consulting folks with chronic fatigue, with thyroid issues, all this stuff. And one thing that we help people do through that process of eliminating stuff that's built up in their joints, built up in their muscles, built up in their liver, built up in their lymphatic system, built up in their lungs, is we get them to, follow very particular protocols of actually flushing that stuff out of your body. And then they're like, wow, I feel like, partially it's nootropics, but that's why I have so much energy now. It's nootropics and really, really taking care of my body in this regard. Okay, so that's like one of the things you really want to have as an option, cleanses and long runs or short runs, right? And drinking lots of water and figuring out the best dietary protocols that work well for you, and figuring out like strategic caffeine protocols that work really, really well. Caffeine and theanine protocols. Theacrine, which is a caffeine analog, as a standalone nootropic protocol. That stuff is powerful. So you really want options. That is, the last reason why you want to cycle off of modafinil. And I'll mention one more thing. I like to be conservative with nootropics. I think it's the only way. I should be conservative with basically everything you do relating to what you're putting in your body. And there is a study, I believe it's on adrafinil. I don't think this is on modafinil, but it's not far-fetched to think this would apply. Where after 8 months of consistent adrafinil use, there were some facial muscle spasms that happened in rats. And that more than likely has to do with dopamine. It may have to do with acetylcholine too. Who knows if that would apply to humans, but this is something to think about. Okay. I don't want to give you guys I want to end it off and bring balance to this podcast. I do not want to give you the impression that I'm saying modafinil is bad, because it's freaking awesome. Are you kidding me? Modafinil is one of the best things. It's on my top 12. No question about it. I took modafinil, it was like 4 or 5 days ago I took modafinil. Yeah, it's awesome. I got a lot done that day. A lot. But cycling smartly for these reasons is really where you want to be. In the end, everybody knows to be surgical and to apply strategy, conscious strategy, to what they do around what they're putting in their body, particularly around nootropics. But folks just don't want to do it because the allure, man. The allure is there. Okay, so you got to be disciplined. You got to be specific. You got to be regimented. You got to have control over yourself when it comes to the allure of modafinil, and know that the best way to take it is to basically take it and then cycle off of it, take it and then cycle off of it, take it and then switch between it and other compounds, take it for 2 weeks and then move to racetams and then move to maybe something that's GABAergic and then move to cycling off and then move to espresso and theacrine and then move to caffeine and theanine and then move to the AACT stack, then move to Cortex, then move to, get back on racetams, right? It's to cycle everything. And if you want a specific, would be my suggestion, if you're going to take modafinil for 3 to 6 months for an acute period of the necessity for productivity, then I would say 4 days on, 3 days off is good. Okay, and if you have to squeeze in 5 days on, 2 days off because of a particularly demanding work schedule, that's okay. But I would suggest then you take the duration that you're taking it, like the 3-month duration, down to 2.5 months or 2 months or something like that. Okay. And again, you really want to have yourself the options to have a bunch of different kinds of nootropic compounds that get the same effect. We lay that out. This is why the Racetam God Guide and the Smarter, Better, Faster digital guide, these digital guides are so valuable, because we lay out strategies on how you can do that. You want, the total and combined of both of those guides, we're talking about 120, 130 plus stacks that are comparable to the feeling you get when you take modafinil. We've got this stack in the Smarter, Better, Faster Nootropics Guide called the TAU Limitless stack. All right, the base of it is triacetyluridine, and it's got a bunch of other very powerful synergistic compounds in it that stack extremely well together. The TAU Limitless stack in the Smarter, Better, Faster Guide, that right there is comparable to modafinil. For some people, it's going to be a lot stronger than modafinil. Dare I say it? And yes, I did. Get the Smarter, Better, Faster Guide at livecortex.com. Get the Racetam God Guide. Again, more Racetam stacks, powerful Racetam stacks. There's 80 plus Racetam stacks. Surgical, modafinil-like Racetam stacks. We have phenylpiracetam stacks in there that are like modafinil. Phenylpiracetam tyrosine stacks. You wouldn't even believe it. You wouldn't even believe it, okay? So get the Racetam God Guide and the Smarter, Better, Faster Guide. By the way, just as a sort of an aside for folks that want to get both of them, you could get both of them for $42. They're $24.99 each, $24 and $24.99, each. It's like $50, but you can get them both for $42. It's on the livecortex.com website. Go to the menu where it says Nootropics Books Combos and save a couple bucks if you want to get both of them. Powerful nootropic products at livecortex.com. Powerful content at livecortex.com. Powerful content at the Cortex Labs, Nootropics, and Smart Drugs YouTube channel. Powerful nootropics content at the Cortex Labs iTunes podcast. And remember, the allure with modafinil is strong, but you want to cycle it and you want to have options. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.